going to begin
All right.
now. We're recording and welcome everybody to the session of the Creative Play Working Group led by Ashish Mehta. Over to Ashish.
Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate everybody showing up. And some of you have joined quite early or quite late from wherever you are. So thanks a lot for that. And I just wanted to set a bit of context for this exercise. So, what kind of originated it was that I was going through a period where I think I sort of built up a lot of unfinished and discarded ideas in the sidelines of my screenwriting life. And this sort of intersected with this period of time when I was also kind of trying to learn more about the Natya Shastra, which is like an ancient Indian treatise on dramaturgy and storytelling. So like they kind of like both these themes sort of intersected because I realized that sometimes we tend to discard ideas or like even say an ancient storytelling formula, for example, because there are just too many industrial, I think, not sure what the right word for it is, but I think the industry sort of really governs how we select certain ideas and how we discard certain ideas. So I think it becomes less about intuition and less about what drives us and more about what the industry wants. So I think I was in a, because I've been a practitioner for quite long, so I think I was in a space where I started to listen too much to what the industry wanted and very little to what ideas actually were kind of intrinsic to who I am and the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. Um, so I think now I will kind of start sharing this presentation. But I think let me just do this, share screen. Hi, just confirming that everybody can see it, the presentation. Okay, super. Um, so just to begin, like I assume like has everybody brought like an unfinished idea with them, or is there something that is on everybody's mind today?
I have an old screenplay in mind.
Okay, great. And what about everybody else?
I see a yes and a thumb.
Okay, great. Okay. So to begin, like a lot of this exercise is actually based on the Natya Shastra, but like I don't want to dive into that right away. I think to begin with, like I think it'll be nice to do an opening reflection about the idea that is on our minds, like an idea that perhaps we brought with us, or anything that pops up as a story that we sort of left unfinished, or a scene that's been left unfinished. And if you could just take perhaps 5 minutes to kind of reflect upon it a little bit. Here are some prompts that I'll read out as well. Like, how long ago did you create your idea? Do you remember the feeling or incident that drove you to create it? What specific element of this idea still resonates with you? What led you to store the idea rather than develop it further? And importantly, did you scold yourself for not completing or developing this idea?
So should we write down
Yeah.
answers for these, Ashish?
Yes, I
Yeah.
would recommend, yeah. And I think at the end of the exercise, like we will go through a discussion where, I mean, people are open to share if anybody wants to share. But I would suggest that just write it as if you're not going to share it with anybody, and preferably by hand. By hand is always great. I think we have about a minute more, so just letting everybody know. All right. Is everybody good with this reflection? Okay, awesome. Um, all right. So as I said at the beginning, like one of the objectives with trying to develop this exercise was partly my struggle to also introduce students to this really, really ancient text, which is actually quite dense and rule based. And I liked the way that it intersected with the idea of with discarded ideas. So I'm going to just have a very, very quick overview and just bear with me for this. And I promise you that it will intersect with the exercise very, very shortly. Um, because I'm not certain how many people are aware of the Natya Shastra and its essentials. So I'll just quickly go over it. But it's an ancient treatise on performing arts that dates back to about 500 BC, which kind of makes it contemporaneous with Aristotle's Poetics. It has a very similarly rule based approach. But what's interesting about the Natya Shastra is that it uses very organic language when it's talking about its five act storytelling structure. Even though it's kind of inflexible, it's still grounded in this ancient Indian philosophy of human action and effort. So it kind of like even though it is technically about performance, it's a text about performance. It leans very heavily on philosophy that underlines things like yoga and meditative practices. So one of the central elements in this storytelling philosophy is the idea of the beach, which literally translates to a seed or a germ, and within this paradigm, it's basically a causal force that compels action and drives efforts. So, in a sense, I think it's comparable to like an inciting incident. Um, and it's mostly used in that manner. So, from the Bij, the Natya Shastra sort of develops a five act structure that I've tried to really kind of briefly summarize over here. In the first act, the seed is created, and we are eager to act towards the result that flows from the seed. So the seed, in a sense, could be something internal, it could be something external. Like there's no definition in that sense. The second act of the story would be a phase of effort, where we are striving towards the result that we see, and we gradually discover more aspects of the seed along the way. So this is a phase where the way the text describes it, that the seed sort of slips in and out of sight, which is kind of unclear as to what exactly that means. But I mean, my interpretation is that as the hero or the protagonist is sort of starting to make their efforts, they understand their impulses a little bit better. The third act is possibility, where the search for the seed intensifies as the seed itself begins to sprout. So if it's a seed that will eventually flower, it's starting to sprout its stems, it's starting to sprout its leaves, etc., becoming a source of nourishment, perhaps becoming a source of discomfort, perhaps depending upon the plant that it is. This is the phase where the attainment of the result seems imminent because the seed is now becoming more and more visible. The fourth stage, the fourth act, is a phase of uncertainty, where we deliberate over our journey on account of perhaps internal distress or feelings like envy or feelings like anger. But eventually, we visualize a certain attainment of the result and sort of solidify our attention towards that. And the final phase is fruition or the climax, where the intended result appears in full and we are united with it, which is basically the seed has kind of flowered, and we as a protagonist have are kind of now united with that result. So I think when I first started reading about the structure a few years ago, I was mostly just really kind of really drawn to the organic language that was used in the original text. So where the beej or a seed is the beginning of the story, the end is something they call the fal yog, which is quite literally it's like a it means like union with the flower, which I thought is quite beautiful. So this kind of led me to, I think, like as a way to introduce students to it, like what I've been trying to do is have them insert themselves into this structure, as opposed to trying to reverse engineer like a story and trying to see how it follows this structure. Because of the organic language, I think it lends itself very easily to a creative journey as well. So this is what I'm sort of offering you and invite you all to sort of embrace the idea that when we write, like our creative journey could also very easily, because it is something so natural, something so powerful, it could follow a structure of this sort. So the way I see it, and this is an example that I can give to students often, is that when we begin to write, there's something that compels us to do this, and that's a motivating creative force, which is the seed. The second phase is a phase of effort, and as we write, we gradually discover more about this seed, more about what motivates us to write, because we don't very often know right at the beginning. Articulating it takes a lot of time. The third phase is possibility, and this is where the seed sprouts, where ideas blossom, and we have ideas piling upon ideas. And this is where I think a lot of the discarded ideas tend to sort of accumulate, because these fuel our creativity, we draw closer to our goals. The fourth phase is uncertainty, which is what coincides with the seed sprouting. And I felt like I could really resonate with this myself, because when kind of the discarded idea pile really grew large, it did really also accentuate feelings of uncertainty, because you're like, how do you deal with this? Like, why have I discarded certain ideas? What are the parameters that I'm using to assess, etc., etc.? And then finally a phase of fruition, which is, I think, like this feels like a cycle that we're all constantly doing each time we start to write something, right? Like there is a phase of fruition where the seed flowers, bears fruits, and births other seeds. We'll go on to write other ideas. So this kind of segues into the other concept in the Natya Shastra, that everything is also cyclical, including the story. Every seed that does flower, that does bear fruit, will also bear seeds, and more seeds that will kind of begin the cycle all over again. So this, I feel like, allows us to sort of reframe the discarded idea kind of in a far more, I feel, natural way. That instead of being something that is evidence of our failure or something that we haven't done, or something, like we tend to often pressurize ourselves for not finishing an idea and to really push ourselves to bringing it to a finish line. But I think when we think of ideas as seeds quite literally in an organic sense, then that leads to at least these four conclusions. I feel that they're evidence of a really, really strong creative impulse, that any idea is just one of many seeds in the cyclical process of creation. So if there is an idea, there will always be more. And they hold tremendous power as dormant life. So it's like, just as seeds can also vary in terms of how long they can stay dormant. Some stay dormant for 2 years, some stay dormant for 5 years, some probably never sprout at all. And it's the same with ideas as well. Which brings me now to the actual exercise. So the two paths that we can follow, I feel, basis this, is that now that, like, if we, I invite you to all to sort of embrace the idea of looking at an idea as this sort of seed. So what I offer you is two paths here. Like one is that you could perhaps reflect on your practice in this context now. Like how, like all the previous questions were more reflective in terms of the past, but these are more reflective in terms of the present. Like, how does it feel to hold the seed in your hand again? Why do you think you chose or remembered this seed for this session? And I think like the overarching point here is that how like can are you able to place this idea in the context of your fundamental driving impulse? Like, why do you write? What is that basic motivation, and how does this idea sort of hold up against that? Are there other seeds in your wall that share some of this DNA? Maybe since you've had the idea, like it's possible that you might have had other ideas that have actually that are in the same zone that might have overlapped, and you might not know that, might not have realized that you could have perhaps already finished this idea in another form. That also tends to happen quite often. Or perhaps like this is a scene or an idea that can be merged with another one of your stories. Because I've noticed again in some of my interactions that I think because of the way the industry is and the kind of genre compartmentalization that happens, we tend to keep ideas really, really distinct. So this is also an invitation to see how ideas can actually merge a little bit. Like maybe this idea is more about a character. Maybe you have another idea that's more a story. Like, can these two be married in some form? Or perhaps this idea needs its own garden, it needs its own screenplay altogether. What would that look like? So this is the practice reflection for those of you, I guess, who feel more comfortable with this approach, or if there are any amongst us who feel really excited about this idea and want to just really kind of dive in, then I invite you to actually just follow this Nati Shastra structure. So I've sort of reframed the 5 acts as questions, which you could perhaps try to answer for your protagonist. Like whether it's a scene or it's an idea, I think it can work in both situations. So, like if it's an idea that you're developing, I would encourage you to answer these questions for the overall story. If it's a scene that you're developing, I would encourage you to answer these questions within the scene's framework. So it could be like, for instance, what internal or external seed drives your protagonist? What result are they working towards? This could be like an overarching story goal, or it could be like a limited goal within a scene. What efforts do they make as they strive towards result? What discoveries do they make about the seed? This could be, again, like this could be overarching, like narrative wide efforts, or it could just be very simple actions within a scene. What complications does it create for them, and so on and so forth. So I'd invite you to just, I guess, follow whichever approach you feel resonates with you at this time. And if there's any questions, of course, I'm here to answer them.
Okay, very good. So we should write down the answers to whichever path we choose. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I would say, like, I think we're pretty good on time, so please feel free to take 10, 15 minutes. Like, there's no rush. So I would ideally like love to have a little discussion for about 10 minutes after.
Yeah. So well, should we say 15 minutes?
Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. I believe we are at 15 minutes, but
Yep.
I will let the host take charge how he wants to.
Should I stop? I think I'll stop sharing the presentation. Hi. So is everyone sort of done? That's a thumbs up from Jennifer. Yeah, I guess like I'd love to hear like, if anyone's willing to share about the idea that they brought into the session and if anything opened up with the exercise or just any feedback, of course, on the session, any feedback whatsoever.
Well, we've got a hand up from Jennifer there. Samantha. I said Jennifer. Samantha.
Yeah.
Samantha, do you want to go?
Sorry, it's very early in the morning. I'm in Australia, which is why my camera's off. But thank you for the prompt. And I brought an idea that I had when I was doing a PhD, and I wanted to write a screenplay, and in the end, I ended up doing something quite different. So I have put this idea down for about 5 years, actually. And I really appreciated the questions because I realized I've also been developing things inside a company. And in fact, nearly all of those projects contain elements of this original idea, which is really interesting in terms of the seed and the vault.
Right.
And then I found, going back to your questions, both the reflection and the narrative made me question whether I should discard the original idea or whether there was a new way back into it. And so just, we only had a few minutes in the process of trying to answer some of those questions. I started to see one of the characters in a different way.
Amazing. Okay. I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh, hang on, I've got to lower my hand. Oh, no, it's long. So that I know that's quite non-specific, but just as a process, I really appreciated this seed result and thinking about also the writer as protagonist in the process, because I think when I was writing the screenplay originally, I couldn't find my voice in there.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things that I found like an interesting element of your presentation, and this concept of the seed. So I was working with an idea for a feature screenplay that I wrote about 35 pages of, I think, I think it was 13 years ago. And it's in no way has been like an ongoing project that I think like, oh, I need to finish that. I abandoned it. But I came across it recently. So it was sort of in my I think it was in my I was looking through all my old files in my Dropbox or something, and I came across it, so I was thinking of it. But that idea of the fact that viewing these ideas as seeds with, I forget the exact language that you use, but with great potential, that there's a flower inside the seed.
Yes.
That's a very nice idea. I like it, and I think there's something to it as well. And I maybe have the feeling that I have these fragments, rather than seeds, these little fragments of a few pages of dialogue or 10 or even 30 pages of a screenplay or a bit of an outline that has kind of gone cold because it came out of my subconscious 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 13 years ago. and sat there, and whatever part of my subconscious, brought that to me is that's a, a different me, and it's cold, and the heat that was I was tapping into when that came out of me is gone, and now maybe some of these ideas just feel like inert fragments, but
Right.
actually I think that idea that of seeing them as seeds, let's say, and as a small thing but with something powerful inside, which I think is your some part of your subconscious. There's some part of your subconscious in this little whatever it is, few pages, 30 pages, character description, whatever, that maybe could be extracted still if you can go back to
Absolutely.
them in the right way.
Absolutely. I think very often, like especially if something like this was written in like in a burst of energy and like something that you really felt passionate about at that time, I feel like there might definitely be something there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
They're not cold and inert little fragments.
Yeah.
They
It is just under the permafrost until the permafrost melts.
just have to be put in the ground and watered. Tom had his hand up for a while. Tom, do you want to know?
Yeah, thanks. I have a rather detailed reply, but if you like, I could try to share it on the screen and go through it quickly. Should we
Sure.
try that? Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All right. Let's see if I can. Let's see if I can find a way to share this thing here.
Yeah, you got it.
Can you see the narrative exploration here?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So I tried to answer all these questions briefly in the spirit of the format, starting with the seed sprouting, getting complicated, having trouble, and then finally sprouting with joy and perhaps generating additional seeds. I think I hope that's close to the intended idea anyway.
Yes.
So anyway, okay, so I had an internal seed saying that the discovery of self was the internal seed of the protagonist, who is a young woman in 1912 London, and the result she's working for is to ride in the 1912 Olympic Games, and she's prevented from riding by her protective father, but she has great talent. And when she learns riding is in fact added to the 1912 Olympics, she confronts her fears and the imposter syndrome and challenges her father and the all male culture at the time to find her place on the greatest sports stage that exists. And what efforts does she make to strive toward it? Well, she pleads with her father to jump and ride, but he's not going to let her. But a patron finds her, recognizes her talent, and hires her to work in his stable. And her mother meets with the patron secretly, and this is the inciting incident, and arranges for training for her daughter to ride and jump. But she has to ride side saddle like all the young women of the day. So that's another thing from that male culture of the time. But she makes progress in her riding and is recognized by the Queen and is in line for an Olympic berth. And then, let's see here, what discoveries do they make about the seed? They discover that the riding event is for gentlemen only. So this pushes her back to the original, to the starting of her journey to self-discovery. And then as the seed began to sprout, what complications does it create? Well, she discovers another event that was added to the Olympics, a modern pentathlon that has riding, but also has 4 other events, and she's not trained in those. So those additional training requirements complicate things greatly for her. But she trains in them and participates in 4 of them in the Olympic trials. But she's disqualified at the last minute before the riding by the Olympic Committee because she's not a gentleman, even though the pentathlon rulebook has no such prohibition. But that afternoon, she sees a young colt cavorting and jumping in the meadow and gets inspired and decides to do something about it. So the next day, she shows up for the ride, even though she is disqualified. After everybody has ridden, she rides and does better than anybody else. and she before she rides though she goes to the water jump and takes the side saddle off and throws it in the water and takes off her riding skirt and stands before everybody in a suffragette dress and then jumps on the horse astride and bareback and then still rides better than all the men and then goes over to the British Olympic official with a sort of a so there comment. But what she's doing was she found joy in finding her true talent. And then she started a movement that's still being felt today in women's sports and how they're pushing the boundaries. And that's the characteristic of an external seed today. Is that close to what you were hoping for?
That's amazing. Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
That's remarkable.
okay. There's details available at a website called goforthefive.com if you're interested in learning more about how this whole thing came to be. It did get shelved and kind of stored away for a little while, and then I wrote it up in a academic article, and then I realized who's going to read an academic article. So I really need to get it out to the public, and the only way to do that is through a film and a screenplay. So that was the genesis of the whole thing. It took a long while, 4 or 5 years, but there it is, and we're getting close. Anyway, thank you very much.
Amazing.
Let me see
Thanks so
how I
much.
can. How do I unshare? Oh, stop sharing. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't know if my camera will work. I had a terrible time with it earlier. Let's see.
And Paul, do you want to go?
Cool. Yes.
Oh, sure. I am not nearly as complete as what Tom had, but
Well,
I wanted to say it's an interesting approach and this idea. It's a true writer's journey to set it in those
it
terms.
is. Yeah.
The struggle that writers have when you get that initial inspiration and the journey you have to go on, if you're open to the story writing itself. And that's really cool. My particular one, it was just it didn't really fit your scheme in the sense that I just had the idea last week, and it's not like I abandoned it. I just came up with it, and
Right.
it would require a lot of research. But it would actually the reverse. It wouldn't be the protagonist that's striving toward a goal. I had in mind. Uh, I don't know, it's a decade ago, there was an article in the New York Times about this doctor from upstate New York near Ithaca, who was near Ithaca. I think he went to medical school in Ithaca and he became a priest and went to Africa and worked. He was the only doctor in this, not the whole country, but a
Mhm.
major portion of the country that was involved in civil war, and he had no
Right.
technology. You had Civil War technology, American 1860s technology, and he just was a healer. And I was just wondering, with all the Epstein stuff, you have that side of humanity, and then you have this other side,
Yeah.
and the celebrity culture and people that are. Uh, in that culture, there's just a filtering system where everybody there is after something, not as bad as Epstein. Let's just say an echelon below the entertainment world. The another story that I just broke a couple of weeks ago was um, this a sportscaster who was an NFL quarterback in American football,
Mhm.
who was obviously making millions of dollars a year, and he got drunk in Indianapolis and got involved in a fight, and he assaulted somebody and almost killed them. And now his career is over. And it's like, what is the
Wow.
value system beneath that surface? And I was wondering how to get the person from Africa to into that world and see how it disrupts that. And the
Right.
seed in that case is, I mean, that's the inspiration, but then the person he has a relationship with would be trying to preserve the negative world, and this person is a disruptor who simply isn't influenced by what everyone else is. So it's pretty vague, but it was a nice exercise. I appreciate that. I think it would help students too.
Nice. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be very useful for my students. Ashish, do you use that process in your own work when you're developing a script?
I have started to now a little bit. Yeah, because I mean, for the longest time I was just in that system of just churning out scripts, and it was mostly on assignment. So I think that was one of the reasons I found it very hard to actually get back in touch with the kind of stories I wanted to tell. So I realized I really have to work hard to sort of reactivate that muscle. And I think it was also like I always found it strange that growing up in India, like we never actually learned about the Natya Shastra. We always learned about Joseph Campbell and like the 3 act structure and stuff. So I think it's been important to me to find a way to kind of bring the Natya Shastra to life also a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if anyone else is familiar with the Natha Shastra. Is that right?
Natya Shastra. Yeah, I'm curious too.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah. Have you thought about writing a book about it?
I think I should.
We would encourage you, I believe.
Awesome. I will. Because it's mind blowing. Like it actually is like it's I think it's probably predates poetics, and it's like it has a very similar approach. It's quite fascinating, I think, to even probably do a comparative study in some sense. But yeah, it's mind blowing because some of these things just got lost to time because of colonialism, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you know, is there sort of good English language work on the Natha Shastra?
There is definitely. Like this also relies upon, like I principally rely upon this one translation by Manmohan Ghosh, which I think is from the 1960s. And there's a few, but I think the challenge has always been that these translations are mostly done in an academic context.
Yeah.
Because the text itself is so dense, and the translations also tend to become quite dense. So they kind of, and I think because they also cover like the performative arts in general. So like, I think the chapter that I relied upon for this exercise is like chapter 21. It's like deep within the book. And the initial pages are all about dance and music and gesture, and it's very, very rule driven.
Okay, so Natya Shastra for Screenwriters by Ashish Mehta. The next big the next big influential book on narrative structure. There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks for the encouragement, guys.
And let's charge him with the responsibility so that the story, the process, is not lost to history, and ask him to adopt a heritage of stewardship for the process for screenwriting.
That's right. And he could apply his own system to writing the book. The seed is that process, and you're going to follow it. Well, thank you for sharing it.
I knew this group had a purpose. That was the purpose.
But I think it's also, I think at a time when there's so much conversation about the need for different story shapes, and obviously climate change, that to have something that speaks to cycles and the organic and can be seen in that way is very powerful, because clearly the hero's journey has not worked for us. We don't like our heroes anymore, and it doesn't work. It's not a narrative that's serving the world. Whereas what I really loved about this was that it is tied to the natural world, and that it can be seen as cyclical rather than just progressive.
Absolutely, Samantha. I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things that also drew me to this a lot, is that it's not actually driven by conflict, which I thought was also fascinating, because we've become so used to stories, like to actually just think about conflict from the very stage of conceiving a story. But this kind of does not, it just doesn't mention conflict all that much. It's very, it only talks about it in specific kinds of stories, because the Natya Shastra also talks about genres and the different structures that apply for different genres. So it talks about conflict in a war story or in a heroic story, but not in the others.
See, one of my biggest bugbears is, which I could go on a big rant about it at the drop of a hat. I'll rant about it right now if you want. It's about how the gurus, the screenwriting gurus, some of them disseminate this idea that there is a universal story, and that all stories essentially are the same. And at least one guru, of whom I'm not a fan, but I'll be polite and not name, says, no, I will name him. He's John York. John York says that writers have no choice but to use the universal story model, which, by the way, he would like to sell you. And I think that discourse from certain screenwriting gurus that all stories basically are the same, which tends to come from misinterpretation of Joseph Campbell, who never said that all stories are the same. He said that all myths are the same. And he also was at pains to demonstrate how they differ, even if they share a similar core. But he made it fairly clear that more modern contemporary societies are very different to the antiquated millennia-old societies from which myths emerged. And he talked about how the symbols that are so essential to the monomyth are very different today to him when he was writing in the 40s. So the screenwriting gurus who say all stories are the same, they're all this one, it flattens difference, it pushes difference to the cultural fringe.
Absolutely.
I think it has a fascistic quality to it in the way that it flattens and erases difference from our shared screen culture. And it's so much more interesting and useful to me, I think, to have good knowledge about these different, sometimes subtly different, sometimes quite overtly different models for shaping stories that come from different cultures and that have the different flavors and different viewpoints and different ideologies consistent with that culture,
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with all that. And the other thing that, in terms of misinterpreting Campbell, is that Campbell didn't analyze drama. He was, you're talking about one thing that always I wondered about over the years was, why would Aristotle say something as obvious as a play should have a beginning, middle, and end? I mean, why? Well, of course it has a beginning. What else would it have? And then until you realize that most experience of human storytelling, 99.9% of it has not been drama. It's been the oral tradition and these epics, which were basically serialized. I mean, you didn't listen to the Iliad or the Odyssey in one night. You got pieces of it. So most people's experience of story was episodes of myth cycles or this or that. And a play has to be complete in one sitting. That's what he says. And so it has a beginning, middle, and end. And so you don't try to cram all this stuff. That even in the Poetics, he talks about some mediocre playwright who tried to put all the Odyssey in one play, and it was ridiculous. You can't do that. That's episodic. So the idea that in a 2-hour stretch you're going to put all these little elements, it's like if it's Tuesday, it must be the Dark Night of the Soul or something. That kind of thing. It is a profound misinterpretation. But it sold some books and made some careers, as you say. So anyway, I'll let that rant go away.
Well, that's it. Yeah, there were an awful lot of copies shifted and money earned by people. I mean, not surprisingly, by people saying, proposing themselves as gurus and saying, "Hey, I've got the magic secret. You want to strike it rich? I've got the secret, and it will work in every occasion, in every context."
Yeah, and but it has this sense of authority because of appeal to Campbell and the mythology, and like it must be profound. But I heard about a colleague who was in production in our school teaching the 5-minute film. They had to make 5-minute shorts, and he was lecturing about the hero's journey. You're gonna put all those elements of the hero's journey into 5 minutes. Anyway,
Oh gosh.
all right. So we have an alternative, thanks to Ashish, or a different angle. So appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I actually need to go off, and you know what I got to do? I got to teach. So I must say good night.
Off to-
Good night
Thank
and
you very
good
much,
morning
Paul.
and good afternoon to whoever.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, shall we wrap up, Ashish?
Yeah,
Well,
I think good.
what-
Yeah.
yeah, I have one more thing I wanted to run by
Yeah,
Chris here, and that is to appreciate the role of the audience reaction in both the oral tradition and in the development of stories, especially the ones that go to the screen and to the stage, because you can have authors of books, you can have all these writing leaders and so forth, but unless you get the audience reaction that it's meaningful for them and they have an emotional takeaway, I think that might be the power behind the throne in some sense. And I suspect there's a germ, there's a seed, so to speak, of that idea in this philosophy that you're espousing
Absolutely,
here.
absolutely. It's wild that you brought that up actually, because one of the major sections in the Natya Shastra is actually rules of spectatorship as well.
Yeah, yeah,
There's actually descriptions about how to interpret like certain gestures, as well as the
right.
correct times to applaud, the correct times to show your appreciation. Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah,
could have been writing about sitcoms almost, I feel.
yeah. And in the end, that really counts a lot, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely.
I agree. I agree. That's what it's all about. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Ashish, for an interesting
Much pleasure.
session. And you're welcome for the book proposal development, free book proposal development that you got
Amazing.
out of
That's
it.
the encouragement.
Invite us for the book signing too. Yeah.
Thanks so much,
And
everyone. I
I
really
have
appreciate